Welcome back to Academic Markets Insights. This is a very exciting topic. You can see I'm like buzzing at the excitement. We are going to be talking about SpaceX going into the Nasdaq 100. And we're going to talk about how this is new, kind of unprecedented, what's been happening in the market, how this could be something that's going to be done for future companies. Um, so it's an exciting time to be talking about these things, and we're just so glad that you're joining us. Again, we're Academic Markets Insights. This is Dr. Russell Rhodes. He is at the Kelley School of Business, and my name is Dr. Larissa Damietz, and I'm at Purdue University. With that, Dr. Rhodes, please get us up to date what's happening with SpaceX.
All right. Well, one of the few things that everybody seems to be paying attention to in the markets this summer, which is normally a quiet time, is the SpaceX IPO. And we all know that people got very wealthy off the SpaceX IPO. But also, and we also know that structurally, they went public later than most companies would go public. They went public, typically you go public, you're a small cap, a mid cap. And then as you grow into a large cap, you end up in indexes like the S&P 500 or the Nasdaq-100, or even the Russell 1000 as well, which SpaceX was added to just a couple of days ago. I'm checking my calendar as to when that happened. So the recent history with SpaceX, I think everybody's aware they went public on June 12th. And then, we were pretty certain that this June 26th announcement was going to come because back in February, Nasdaq changed their rules around slightly with respect to how they add stocks to the Nasdaq 100. And this rule change was definitely in front of the SpaceX IPO. And when you see the criteria for joining the Nasdaq 100 in a quick manner, it almost describes what we got out of SpaceX. It also describes what I think we're going to see out of a couple of more IPOs as well. And then this stock's going to be added to the Nasdaq 100 on the market open on Tuesday, July 7th, which means that the index funds, and I'll say this a couple of times, are going to need to buy the stock by the close on July 6th. And when I say index funds, QQQs, any other fund that follows, tries to beat the Nasdaq 100, but anything along those lines. Yes, Dr. A.
For our number one fan, what is an index fund?
An index fund is like the S&P 500 or the Nasdaq 100 or the Russell 1000, and they are a method of just kind of displaying general stock market health from day to day. Different indexes have slightly different criteria. The Nasdaq 100 is known as as kind of a large cap tech index, and hence that's why SpaceX is going in there so quickly. The S&P 500 is 500 of the largest companies in the United States. And stock indexes, I believe the first one was the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which was launched by Barron's. And I think it was initially only 20 stocks, well over 100 years ago. And if you want stock market exposure, often one of the ways that individuals go about getting that exposure is through buying, a fund that mirrors the S&P 500 return or the Nasdaq 100 return. The most common ways of doing that, and I threw out QQQs, and I thought that's what you were going to ask me. That is the Nasdaq 100 ETF. The SPY ETF is the S&P 500 ETF. There's also a couple of other very large versions that have slightly lower fees than the SPY. But index funds or indexes are out there to give us an idea of the health of the stock market. And different indexes give us, a different idea as to how different parts of the markets are doing. Was that a good enough answer?
It was.
Kind of got us there? Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. So the fast entry criteria. I kept calling it Fast Track, which is TSA. This is fast entry. And a newly listed, where did I do in my note? A newly listed company must rank within the top 40 current Nasdaq 100 constituents by market cap to qualify for fast entry. I believe that you'd need to be about 100 to 110 billion in market cap to be the 40th largest company in the index right now. It varies it varies from day to day.
Sure, it's still a lot of money.
Yeah, I believe SpaceX, as of maybe yesterday, was at 2.6 trillion, which made them the sixth largest company. So the fast entry criteria that came up within February, again, in anticipation of some large tech-oriented companies going public in 2026, they decided they can add it within 15 days after listing. And typically, the big changes for the Nasdaq 100 occur during the December reconstitution, and I'll talk a little bit about that toward the end of the presentation. However, if one Nasdaq 100 company merges with another Nasdaq 100 company, they may be an addition to the index that happens before that December reconstitution. The December reconstitution is where smaller companies are taken out and larger companies are put in. Also, and I don't think they're doing it I think they are actually doing it this way. So adding this stock doesn't necessarily mean one that's going to drop out. And so instead, the index is going to contain more than 100 companies until the next annual reconstitution. So the amount of the index that will be represented by SpaceX is being pulled from all 100 members. So it's not going to have a very large impact on any of those individual stocks. It's like 1.2% of their weighting in the NASDAQ will be reduced in front of SpaceX, or in conjunction with SpaceX being added on the morning of Tuesday, July 7th. The impact on the index, the guesstimate right now is the initial weight is going to be in the 3 to 4% range. There are some unique criteria with respect to SpaceX and its weighting relative to its market cap, and that has to do with its modest float. It's got, like I mentioned, it's going to take the current constituents' weightings down slightly. It will increase the technology influence in the Nasdaq 100, but the Nasdaq 100 is basically a technology index with a couple of exceptions already. So I don't think that's going to have much of an impact. They're going to have to, the ETFs and the index funds will have to buy shares. They will buy them pretty much on a cross on the close Monday before it's added on Tuesday. The Qs, that Nasdaq 100 index fund and the other index funds will have to rebalance. And there will be a closing auction. And the closing auction volume, I think they have a closing auction every day for rebalancing like this, but it's very significant on rebalance days. They do it in a very efficient manner. But if you're paying close attention, you'll probably see a giant spike in volume on the close for SpaceX shares. Yes.
So I have two questions for the number one fan. What does it mean you said modest float?
Well, so
what is float? Maybe
the float is the number of shares that are available for trading versus the overall value of the company. And SpaceX only sold, I want to say 10 to 20% of their shares to the public initially. So they've got a lot more shares that will be issued over time. And as that happens, SpaceX's weighting in the Nasdaq 100 will likely increase as well. Probably if they start to do that, it will probably increase at that late December reconstitution that they do every year. And then you had another question.
I do. You talked about the closing auction. Can you explain a little bit more what a closing auction is?
Sure. It's going to be it'll be a situation where you have people throughout the trading day say, I am willing to sell my shares on the close, and I am willing to buy shares on the close. And they basically cross at a closing price. And the idea is to reduce some of the market volatility associated with the stocks being added to these index portfolios. It keeps the people that run the QQQ from spending all day on Monday, the day before it gets added, buying shares, buying shares, buying shares. It makes sure that the index's performance and the index fund performance matches up with the index's performance, and the index's performance is based on the closing price of the stock. So there are lots of reasons that we have a closing auction for index funds every day. It's a much more significant process. I mean, there are days that people don't even participate in it, but when the Russell 2000 and Russell 1000 are rebalanced once a year in June, or when the Nasdaq 100 is rebalanced in late December, there's a unique process to try and dampen the volatility around adding those stocks to the portfolio.
Excellent. Thank you.
You betcha. Typical benefits of being in an index. And I almost feel silly talking about these because SpaceX is a giant company with huge liquidity and already is going to have all kinds of great analyst coverage. It usually takes a month for a stock to get analyst coverage kicking in after it goes public. There's also increased institutional ownership because there are lots of institutions that are trying to benchmark against the Nasdaq 100, which means they want exposure to a good portion of the Nasdaq 100 stocks. And that gives just long-term demand for the stock as being part of the benchmark. And what companies really would like, they want as many of their shareholders to kind of stick with them for the long haul as possible. And index funds are the ultimate buy and hold vehicle. So being in an index is a huge benefit. When you see people rush into the stock market without taking individual stocks into account, they're buying one of these broad-based ETFs, some of that money is going to flow straight to SpaceX. And, in the case of the NDX or Nasdaq 100, 100 other stocks, once it gets into the S&P 500, which at the earliest will probably be December of 2026, but they've got some things that they have to overcome for that. You would see that benefit them even more. In fact, if it looks like if you want to try to get ahead of the SpaceX being included in the S&P 500, you might actually consider taking a long position in the Nasdaq 100 because SpaceX is going to be a good portion of that fund, and people will have to buy SpaceX for the S&P 500 fund. They don't sell it out of the Nasdaq 100 fund. No, they don't. So, there are little things I have written down to pay attention to market structure-wise with respect to SpaceX as they start to grow and start to sell more of their shares as well. When it looks like they may be getting close to getting in the S&P 500, there's probably a nice opportunity for a short-term long trade there. This is our warning. Now, the stocks typically do trade up on the day of inclusion. I think that's kind of a given. However, I did want to take a look at what happens to stocks that are added to the Nasdaq 100 after they have been added. And I was not surprised at these outcomes. I feel like a lot of people that are infatuated with SpaceX and Tesla and stocks like that believe that being added to the Nasdaq 100 is going to be like a huge leg higher, much like the mentality around crypto. Crypto gets added to something, that's a bonus for that. However, about 2/3 of Nasdaq 100 additions, and I went back to the first day of 2022, traded lower on the first day they were included, which would be Tuesday, July 7th, and over the first 5 days of inclusion. And the average first day performance is down 1.13%. The average 5-day performance is down 3.41%. Wow. There are 35 stocks there have been more than 35 additions to the Nasdaq 100 since the beginning of 2022, but some of them were done with 1 day notice. And I excluded those. I only included the ones that we had at least 10 days notice that it was going to be added, so people could kind of try to position around in front of that. And that makes them similar to the process behind SpaceX, which was announced 10 days before they're going to be added that they were going to be added. So the next chart shows the one-day performance for the 35 relevant stocks that have been added to the Nasdaq 100 since the beginning of 2022. And goodness gracious, is there some red on there?
There's a lot of red.
Now Teradyne is the one that's way over at the far right.
Mm-hmm.
I can never tell what's being covered up until I see the video later. But that one's up a little. That one's up about 4.5% or so. That was the best performer of all of these stocks on the day that it was added. And again, addition day is the first trading day that it's part of the index. They've been bought by the index fund the day before. So we had artificial demand the day before. Not totally shocking that the stock sells that we would expect the stocks to give back a little ground the day after. What surprised me is the next slide. And the next slide, over the first 5 days, the win percentage is just about the same, but the average price change over the first 5 days after going into the NDX or the Nasdaq 100 is a 3.41% loss. I know this is and that's, you and I are kind of on a summer sabbatical right now. And I dug into these numbers for some work that I do with Nasdaq. And after I saw the numbers, I pinged you and said, we got to go talk about something, because and your jaw's dropping a little bit on this one.
I'm also thinking, what a potentially great buy signal. So if you can wait those 5 days,
it gives you an opportunity to get in at a lower price, maybe.
Like if you're interested in SpaceX, waiting that 5 days is worthwhile to jump into it, so that if you know that the low is going to come, you can take advantage of it.
Absolutely.
A little bit of market timing.
Absolutely. So this guy, even Teradyne. Remember, this is what got me out. Look at both ends of this chart.
I'm looking.
First day, both of these 5 days later, and they're not lower from after the first day. That includes this. They sold off.
Huge.
So yeah. AAP. That's an interesting company. I'd never heard of them, but oh my God, it's like a massive performer.
What is it? Do you know?
I can't even.
I'm looking it up.
It's what? Oh, APP. It's App Lovin' Company Corporation. Helps businesses in every side to connect to their ideal customers. Year to date, the 12-month total return on that stock is 57%.
Wow.
Yeah, but I'd never heard of them.
No.
I never heard of it. But I also have this thing where I really try to keep my focus on the 50 stocks with the biggest option volume, and I don't think they're one of those right now. But they're still a massive company, and the stock's gone from like the teens to the hundreds in just about 3 years. But yeah, you can see ODFL and Teradyne were both up tremendously the first day, and they gave it all back and then a little over the next 4 days. Which leads me to how you trading this. And we don't often go, how you trading this, but this is what I'm planning on doing on Monday, July 6th, and maybe July 7th. So late Monday, I'm gonna sell a slightly out of the money call spread that expires the Friday, that coming Friday. Now I know that's a 4-day trade, and I showed 1 and 5-day trades. If I can cover it for a dime, I'll get out of it at a dime. SpaceX is all over the freaking place. So it's doubtful that I would be able to. And I also want to pay very close attention to how this one behaves, because Anthropic and OpenAI, both of which are going to have fairly high, um, fairly high uh, valuations. In fact, I'm trying to find those numbers real quick. Um, but both of them are going to be closer to $1 trillion when they go public. They're going to be well above that 100 to 110 million threshold that we have right now to
Right.
get fast entry into the Nasdaq 100. So when and Anthropic is expected right now, it's expected in October of this year, and OpenAI they're thinking maybe early 2027. All of this varies on market. If the market sells off hard in the fall this year, you're not going to see an Anthropic IPO.
Sure.
They'll push it out. But I'm paying close attention to what's going on here because and then also if the stock's higher on Tuesday, I'm going to sell another call spread
With an
that expires
expiration.
on Friday. It just depends. I'll sell another slightly out of the money call spread. And the thinking is, if the stock does like this on the first day,
Hmm.
that it likely is not going to follow through. The only one that's really followed through is APP. Out of all of these, the ones that were up on the first day that followed through and were also much even higher on the fifth day. So, about a 1 in 35 chance. If so, again, if SpaceX, and this isn't on the slide, but if SpaceX is higher on Tuesday, I'm probably going to sell another out of the money call spread.
So,
If not, I'm just going to, hopefully wait till Friday.
and what really makes APP and SpaceX very different is, again, just the media around
Yeah, I
it.
had no idea
I,
what that stock
if you
was.
haven't heard of APP, and this just goes in general with investing, if you're looking for a company that's going to pop and make a substantial amount of return, you said 50% in 3 years, that's huge.
Yeah,
That's atypical.
yeah.
You're going to want a company that's underappreciated, undervalued, and SpaceX just isn't it. SpaceX is, there's so much more
Mm-hmm.
involved with it because of the excitement around the company itself.
And part of my dissertation had to do with visibility and stock performance.
Hmm.
And there is somewhat of an inverse relationship there
Sure.
because people haven't discovered. Everybody knows Apple,
Right.
so everybody doesn't know. I see. I've already forgotten the name of this company. AppLovin. Do you think this is totally a super bad callback to McLovin?
I, you know, it's
I
it's interesting.
It might be. I mean,
It
really.
could
App
be.
AppLovin serves clients worldwide. All right, with that, we're going to see how things go. Is SpaceX going to follow the old pattern, or is it its own animal? And then, of course, we'll be checking back as we get a couple more very large IPOs this year.
Yep.
So, with that, do you want to talk nice to everybody and have them subscribe, etc.?
Yes, if you haven't already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit like. And if you have any questions for us, we are open for constructive feedback, not criticism, feedback. And we are very interested in different topics that you are interested in hearing about because we enjoy doing this. And as Dr. Rode pointed out, we are on a bit of a summer sabbatical. So with that, thank you so much for enjoying and happy 4th of July.